For 6 years, I've poured my heart into English Oak Recording, a recording studio based here in Richmond, Virginia, a space for artists to come and make records and for me to help them make the best record possible. Today, we're going to take a tour of the studio and we're going to talk about the gear that we're using. And later in the video, I'm going to talk about the 2 pieces of gear that really changed my workflow and allowed me to start making professional records. Let's go take a look. Welcome to the studio. We do a little bit of everything here, but 2 of my favorite things are recording and mixing. And why those 2 specifically? Well, in order to have a good mix, you also need to start with a great recording. To me, recording is the most important part of the record making process. Let's talk about the brains of the entire studio, the Lynx Aurora converter. And what this does is it is interfacing the analog world into the digital world. This was a dream piece of gear to me, and to have it all these years later is incredibly special. They make some of the best conversion out there, and knowing that, their high quality conversion is supporting the work that I do and the songs that the artists bring into the studio, that's just really special to me, and it's something that I want to offer to everybody that comes in here. First, you'll see 2 API 512V preamps. And I love API preamps. They fit in this perfect middle ground to where you have that warm analog sound, but it's also not too colored and stylized for a preamp. So I find that it works really great on just about everything. And they're also the inventor of the 500 series format. If you need a little bit more saturation from it, you can crank it. And specifically with the 512V, we have an output trim. So you can really get that preamp nice and hot, dial it back, see a proper gain staging when you're tracking, because like we said earlier, the recording is the most important part of the record making process. And we've got 2 SSL dynamics modules. SSL is a company out of England, and they have had just a massive impact on the music industry. In 1979, they released their SSL 4000 series consoles, and those consoles were used to make countless records for decades and decades of music history. And so these were originally found on consoles, and you would have one of these dynamics modules alongside maybe like an EQ section that you would use to record and also mix entire records with. And it's worth taking note if you are someone who's looking to get into being an audio engineer, being a mixing engineer, working in a studio. Often a lot of what sounds good in a record is also what's familiar. And so knowing that SSL has been the backbone of a lot of great records over decades of music history, and knowing that mixes were often done using this same dynamics processor, it's going to be a familiar sound. It's going to be a great sound, and it's SSL. What else more can you say? And right next to that, we've got our SSL mix bus compressor, also found on their 4000 series consoles, and this was used as the finishing touch on countless records. When you hear people talk about the way a compressor can glue a mix together, well, gluing a mix together started with the SSL bus compressor. These 3 units specifically, I bought used, and I wanted to make sure that I got them when SSL was still making all their products in the UK. To me, that's really special because, I was born here in America, but also I have a lot of family members who were born in England. It's almost like having a reflection of myself in my gear choices. And now I want to talk about the piece of gear that really allowed me to start getting professional results in my work, the Universal Audio 1176. It's amazing on vocals, everybody's used it on their vocal, and it absolutely destroys drums in a way nothing else does. Let's talk about our monitors. We've got a pair of Focal Alpha 65s. I love these speakers. I've had them since day one. They were recommended to me by a fellow audio engineer, and they're incredible. I also do a lot of mixing on the Beyerdynamic DT770s. If I nail the mid-range on these, it translates perfectly, and the low end is also great as well. And to just have a consistent space to be mixing, whether you're here at the studio, maybe you're working at home or in a coffee shop or you're traveling, Having a great pair of headphones that you can know and trust is really, really important. And these biodynamic headphones are also really comfortable on top of being really reliable. Where we're at right now is kind of directly behind the desk, right next to the couch. You can kind of see the couch in the frame. And this is where we track vocals, guitars, anything like that. And I like to tear down the area when I'm not using it just to keep the room nice and open. But let's talk about what we're looking at. We made a video on this. This is the Behringer P16 HQ. I believe this to be a new offering from them. And yeah, it's been great so far. I've only had a couple sessions with it. Clients have been happy and I seem to be getting better results. So far, really, really loving it. This is the mic that we're using on everything. This is the 414 BULS from AKG. It's a discontinued model from the 1990s, I believe. And this was the last model 414 to have a transformer on the output section of the microphone. Yeah, you can make a whole video on the history of what the AKG 414 has been. This one's great. It's really dark and really flat. Some people might not like it for that, but that's actually why I love it. It just works great on a bunch of different things. Next to the 414, we have got a pair of Neumann KM184s. Neumann just makes incredible microphones and they need no introduction. They're world class. And yeah, they've built a reputation for themselves for being some of the best out there. When I'm tracking with these, I usually like to keep them in that XY configuration for acoustic guitars. And a fun trick that I like to do is maybe I'll turn the stand and just arm one of the mics, do a verse, mono with one of the KM184s, and then when the chorus comes in, maybe I'll switch both mics on. In the recording, you're opening up the chorus by actually getting wider with how you're miking the acoustic guitar, making more space for things like the vocal to cut through. You can just build out a great sounding production just with being intentional with how you're miking things. Let's go on over this way and see what's happening on this side of the room. Over here is kind of just a nice area for someone to sit. When I made this area, I envisioned this kind of being like the command center for whatever client I was working with. Where you're at right now is where the vocal booth is and the desk is right there. If you can see it to my left, this is my toolbox and it's got some microphones here at the top that we'll go over here in a little bit. And the rest is actually just kind of tools and stuff like screwdrivers, strings, more patch cables, all just utility things that you don't necessarily want to be in a closet, that you want to be able to grab right away if you're in a session doing work, stuff like that. Speaking of strings, we got a bunch of different things that need strings next to me. This is my favorite guitar ever. This is a 1965 Epiphone FT45N. Super long name, but really it's like a Gibson LG1, just rebranded with the Epiphone badge. These were made at a time when Epiphone and Gibson were made on the same line by the same builders. And yeah, it's a really special guitar. It has really beautiful checking. And it found me at a time where playing guitar was really difficult for me and not an enjoyable process for the first time ever in my life. And I got this guitar to try and flip it to pay some bills, and I fell in love, and it really brought me back from not a great time. Next to that, I've got my 1999 Fender Telecaster. It's USA made. It's considered my birth year guitar. I was also born in 1999. And it's just so cool to think about this guitar having been on the earth as long as I have. Next, we have got our 1983 Japanese Fender Jazz Bass. And this is a 61 spec. I got it off of Craigslist, which is why it has this crazy pickguard. It's not my favorite pickguard ever, but it gets a lot of compliments, which is kind of funny. And yeah, it's great. I've got flat wound labella strings on it, and it's just a good solid bass to have here in the studio. And last, this is my 2018 Gibson G45. Essentially it's a J45, but they call it G because this guitar is made with more green, sustainable woods. I believe it is a spruce top like normal, but it's actually a walnut back and sides, which is really cool. My desk is also walnut, so it matches. And the neck, I believe, is made of some sort of composite wood, similar to like a Taylor guitar. All right, and let's go over what microphones we have here at the studio. I keep everything that I'm using on a day-to-day basis out like you saw earlier. but I've got a few extra things that I take with me to other studios or just things I've collected over the years. I've got a pair of Sennheiser 421s. The Sennheiser 421 gets some hate for how the bleed sounds when you're using them on toms, for example, but nobody talks about how useful this bass roll-off switch can be to get rid of some low end that you're not going to need up front in the recording process. Getting things as great as they can be in the recording process is the key to having a great mix. So even if the bleed gets a little funky on these, being able to clean up the low end with that bass roll-off switch is really nice. We've got a bunch of 57s. We've got 2 new ones, and I've actually got this Unidyne 357. And what's different about this one? Well, it was made in the USA. It's vintage. The new ones aren't made in the USA. And there's a bit of a debate on these sounding better, or let's just say different, than the new ones. We've also got a bunch of guitar pedals. You may have inferred from earlier that, I played guitar in a bunch of bands growing up, played guitar on a bunch of records. So I wanted to have a good set of pedals for the studio, and I keep them all right here. And let's talk about a pedal manufacturer you haven't heard of before, and that is Yesterday Effects. This is their Jimmy/Jimmy pedal, and what they mean by that is Jimi Hendrix or Jimmy Page. What flavor do you want? It's all in one pedal. This is a fuzz pedal, and it's got a tone bender Mark II and a fuzz face circuit all in one. And I've been able to get some just really amazing tones out of this pedal. This is a pedal company you want to keep your eyes on. Last but not least, the most creative pedal manufacturer in the game, Chase Bliss. This is their Generation Loss Mark II. I find myself going to the Chase Bliss when I need to get really creative. It has a tape stop function where you can press and hold and it goes as if, the tape machine of sorts is slowing down. So I like getting really weird stylized effects going in with pedals because you can't ever recreate that again. So you kind of just are happy with the imperfections in it. So if you want to get really creative, Chase Bliss, but overall, you should incorporate pedals into your production. This is a 1976 Mark I Fender Rhodes, and a brief history on the Rhodes. The original design for this keyboard was actually a lot smaller, and Harold Rhodes designed this to be an instrument that wounded soldiers could play while they were healing in the hospital. And knowing that it started as an instrument meant to heal people is a really special piece of the history of this instrument. And then we've also got this Korg Minilog XD, but it's got 2 patches on there that I really can't live without. They sound great, and when they work, they really work in a production. Thanks for checking out my studio English Oak recording. In this week's newsletter, we're putting all the tips from today's video sent straight to your inbox. Ditch the algorithm and sign up for our newsletter down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. And until then, I've got some music to work on. Today we're going to take a tour of the space, and we're going to...
Ah, shit. We are connected and rolling. Hold on, it's disconnected.